Hello, everyone. This is Opeyemi, Dr. O, and I am doing a live stream over at Substack on a Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. When you look at this, will vary, but I tend to do about 20 minutes, and I'm going to continue to do my own 20 minutes straight and not have the AI being used. When I tried that last week, mysteriously, it would not upload to YouTube. And I had to use other technologies that were not as good as the ones that I had been offered. So we're going to try it again this week and see if the same thing happens. This week, sometimes you're paranoid and sometimes they're really out to get you. Welcome, Phoebe. I just explained that last week when I tried to upload my lovely, well acoustic 20 minutes to YouTube, it wouldn't upload. So I had to do a tinny version, Tinny. So we'll try it again this week. And if it does not work, I may have to think about other technologies or not doing this weekly. I start in a place that's very rural, as I've said before, rural enough to have baby foxes, a whole litter of baby foxes that got passed along. So it says, oh dear, that's too bad. Yeah, it's always too bad, but it's all good because at this point in time, I'm really going with the flow. So I have advertised myself as a mystic and not a mad woman. I last week was contemplating and said, holy moly, I really am becoming a endangered species, a unmedicated American woman post my menopause. So that is kind of fun to be feeling and thinking into. And I will begin with the end. The end is as I focus with a woman, a plan going towards expatting out of this country. The last piece of one's planning, if one is over 50, ought to be looking at deaf issues. So I go regularly to deaf cafes. This is a phenomenon all over the world. It was started in England. So when you have a deaf cafe, you are supposed to have cake. In my part of the world, they substituted in cookies or something like that. But anyway, deaf cafes are places where you can talk about your experiences of grieving, your experiences of funerals, what you liked and didn't like, your plans personally, and anything else related to the concept of death and dying, because this is something that we are not very comfortable with yet. The other cafes that are popping up all over the world, but I'm speaking primarily here in the United States, would be our menopause cafes. So you can now search with a search engine the phrase menopause cafe, and ideally you will find something near and dear to where you are. I wanted to come on here to extend a conversation that I began with an essay looking at the concept of social work. Social work as it exists in the United States of America, or as I say, the untied states of America. There's a lot of K's in there. And what I found and researched, I wanted to share. Many of you are aware that we all trace modern social work back to Jane Addams and the whole settlement house model of wealthy white woman looking around her saying, oh dear, life is really horrible for these people who do not have money. And back in the day, we had poor houses. We did not have orphanages. We had poor houses, and everybody was housed together. And the first thing that happened, sort of with modern social work, was separating the children. Does that sound like anything you've heard recently? The first thing was, can we get the children into cleaner, safer spaces? So the idea of orphanages came up. And also, I read that orphanages tended to not be for orphans. They were often for men whose wives had died in childbirth and they were overwhelmed, and they would have their children go to the orphanage even though they were still alive. There are so many scandals involved with early social work and orphanages. But let me just stick to my part of the world, which is Vermont. Vermont has a very ugly history with the eugenics movement. Um, the University of Vermont was actually home to Francis Perkins, I think is that the name? I want to get the name straight, but I didn't want to do too much research for this. I wanted to more talk story a little bit. The person who was up at UVM is one of the fathers of American eugenics. The social work movement in Vermont helped the eugenics movement with a organization called the Council on Family Life. Look it up. And the Council on Family Life, unfortunately, tried to undo some of the more progressive pieces of what Vermont had done. Vermont had in the 1880s and 90s, how you're going to keep a girl down on the farm after she's gone to the mill towns. The white rural farmers in Vermont in the 1870s and 80s were without wife materials because their sisters, you wouldn't marry your sister, but the women in the family were going to the mill towns. So Vermont fast tracked people to whiteness, so that it was legal and okay for you to marry a indigenous woman, if you were white male, to marry a mixed race woman, um, and most importantly and most alarmingly, to marry the French Canadians, because I don't know if you understand Vermont, but you will recognize that it is a British French fought over place if you know our history. So, social work. In the essay that I wrote, I said my problem basically is that when I see a social worker in my head, I see a white woman with some racial controlling overtones. And that's because of that particular history that I know about my state. I am happy to have in my life a white male social worker so I can see and switch that weird image around where only at the tippy top of the pyramid do you see the men. I do a lot of social work. That was one of the reasons I wanted to come on here. The idea of people who have more money reaching back, looking back, and figuring out how to be helpful to others has been a part of most religions, at least the Abrahamics, which I'm more familiar with than some of the Eastern religions. And consequently, what happens in a country like the United States? What has happened here is we have had institutions, Catholic charities, Jewish whatever, that will often fill in the gaps for their own tribe or their own slice of the American pie. I am happy to say that I was on the herstory end of uncovering history of a woman in Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, a Black woman named Frances Nelson, who founded an orphanage for the very children I was telling you about, the whole idea of men whose wives had died and they needed help. So they would not be um, orphaned the way we think of them, but the father would leave the child in the care of, in this case, a lovely house in Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, that became a health clinic. And that was where I worked for 3 years in a younger version of me in my life. So Black social workers, very, very interesting to me. White social workers, Jewish social workers, all the social workers who tend to be women who want to tend and befriend others. So I just tracked, for sake of this short live stream that I'm doing, the Black maternal health initiative. So here in Vermont, and I have to get a hold of another phone, so you may see me on two phones figuring this out. The Black women's health initiative in Vermont, a representative named Saudia Lamont put forward a resolution that a week in April will be the week where we pay more attention to our Black women in with respect to the maternal health problems that they have. So if I can find her email, we're going to read the resolution part together. This was done this morning at the State House here in Vermont at the Capitol, Montpelier. Interestingly, it is very interesting to me to say that I wasn't able to go because I was doing boots on the ground work with an adorable pair of children, daughters of a woman who I supported in her childbirth and her pregnancy. The children are now 7 months old and a little bit over 2.5. And this is the week without childcare. So, as everybody in Vermont knows, we have several shortages, shortage of housing, shortage of childcare. The shortage of childcare has been heartbreaking. These children, inshallah, luckily, do have placements, and they just had a week off. But generally, that is an ongoing problem for us here. I cannot find the piece that I wanted to share with you. However, I will be looking at crunching numbers because I'm also in a program that acknowledges that many of us who find ourselves in situations wanting to do social work types of um, service are also from families that have a lot of dysfunction in them. In the 12-step language, there are programs called Adult Children of Alcoholics or Adult Children from Dysfunctional Families, and Al Anon, often for relatives. This was started primarily for the wives of the husbands in the 1930s and 40s, and these are all white Lutheran sourcing people. So very limited belief, but if you can expand moving forward, what we have now are very vibrant communities that are looking at where our ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, match up with some of our choices of profession like social services, nursing, and that we want to pay attention to when we are feeding what we call codependent behaviors. So I am in an under earning program. Well, yeah, I guess I was an under earner my whole life because I haven't understood money so well. But I want to say that after I left conventional medicine, after 22 years in, and became a peer support person in the social working role, I really left a lot of money on the table because my skill set is higher than the jobs that I tend to do. So let's crunch some numbers together and see what we come up with because I wrote them down here. I, as I said, was happy to be aware that this is Black maternal child and mother health initiative week. And I have been boots on the ground doing the services. 7 months ago, I was caretaking in a very intimate way the mama of these two lovely children. And this mama delivered the baby I'm going to name places, University of Vermont Hospital. Now, I was with her for the induced labor that she experienced and for the scheduled cesarean section that she ended up undergoing because her plans for a vaginal birth after cesarean got turned into a trial of labor. Do you hear the difference in those words? Right? A trial of labor. Hi, Nene. It's good to have you here. We're talking a little bit about Black maternal and family health issues as I experienced them in one-on-one care 6 months ago in a hospital with a lovely mama who is doing very well these days. Overworked, very stressed, but the baby and the mother are great. And I was looking at what that would have cost. There is a new old role in health. It used to be called your auntie, your nana, or your mother, but now it's your doula. right? Your doula. You can have a birth doula. I want to say, sadly, that word doula is Greek and it means slave. All right. So I have never been very fond of calling myself a birth doula, a death doula, any kind of slave. I will sub in midwife because that's who always did this particular kind of work, being with the mamas when they're having the baby. So I was with this lovely mama when she was having her baby at UVM. And on the way, a couple of things happened. One of them was, if you want to price out what that was on getting her to and from her visits, let's just price that at a charity rate of 14 cents per mile, and getting her 2 to 3 times a week because she got gestational diabetes. She was just over the line with just one number wrong on gestational diabetes. So she had all these really aggressive tests done for the rest of her pregnancy from essentially 5.5 months on. That was something I was moderately critical of. So we had that particular cost. And then once she got to be high risk, she had to go past her local hospital. This is happening to a lot of women, and go to the higher risk hospital, which was round trip. I cranked it out here. Let's just see. Oh, 78 miles. Okay, 78 miles round trip, twice a week for the final month of her pregnancy, and that ended up being $15.60 per trip. I took her a lot of times. Other people took her sometimes. And then the cost of a birth doula these days in the United States is anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Here in Vermont, it's $800 to $1,500. So let's just say I'm high end on the doula end. So I would be more like, let's just say $1,200 for my services that I left on the table. All those trips at $15 a round trip, I left on the table. Moving right along, I was also her personal chef and brought a family of 3 to before meals about 3 times a week. That is actually $500 or so worth of food, as estimated by the AI that answers the question of how much a personal chef would cost. And the estimate is $2,000 to $3,600 a month. And I did that for, let's say, the last 2 months of the pregnancy and for the month after the pregnancy, so 3 months. So I will crunch all those numbers together and see what we are looking at now. As far as in the language of under-earning, did you leave any money on the table? I think I might have left a few $1,000 there on the table as I added up. So we got $1,200 for the cost of the services to the mom. We've got, let's just say, if it's 2,000 to 3,500, let's make it 3,000. I'm a pretty frugal cook. Okay, let's back that up. Plus, yeah, 2,000. Oh, that was a month. Oh, we did that for 3 months. Sorry, that's going to be 6,000. All right. Yeah, we are leaving significant money on the table. All of this to say, I don't want to have to think that way. And I am moving forward with modeling alternative culture. That is the one anti fascist thing that I can do, that I want to do loudly and well. Model alternative culture. How about a culture where we can crowdsource? That's the new word for all of this, right? How do we fund our projects? How do people who need money find money? We have patrons, we have grant writing, we have angel investors, we have venture capitalists, right? Well, I'm just going to back down from a lot of that and say, I just want people to be kind to each other. So as I hit 200 subscribers. Yay me. All right, I'm at 199. I am pledging that I will expand my $5 a month program on Patreon to my subscribers over here. I have a lovely group of about 10 paid subscribers. I'm saying that I do not want more people subscribing here at Patreon. Why? Because I've worked very hard to find places that are a little less capitalist than other places, and Substack certainly was one of them. I did say was. As I move forward in life, I got myself away from Facebook. Then I went over, and when Trump said don't go to TikTok, I went to TikTok. I quickly found myself with 60,000 followers. But what does that mean? I don't do influencer kind of things. I want to edutain and educate people. So I let that go because TikTok asked me to sign another deal, and I read the fine print, and it was definitely not a safe place to stay anymore. I'm here on Substack a little under a year, and I want to say what I see with the writers is wonderful. What I'm seeing with African Americans and from the African diaspora, Black, Substack is cooking. I'm loving it. But more and more people are monetizing in ways that they start an article and then they cut it off. And if you do that for a paragraph or two, I'm okay. But if you cut me off halfway through the article, you're going on my shit list. And I have a couple people that I have to unsubscribe, even following to, because I don't like that bait and switch. It is definitely a way to sell things. That is not the way I want to sell things. The way I want to sell myself is to have you all, whoever's watching out here, consider $5 a month over at Patreon. It gives me a better kickback, and Substack is again creeping in with data mining in places where they said they weren't going to do that. $5 a month. I'm expecting I'm going to need this for about a year to get myself from here to there. And there is Panama. And along the way, I can keep doing wonderful things like childcare. So let's just say, oh, we forgot to add that part in. Let's give ourselves a reasonable rate. Here in Vermont, we decided that a fair hourly wage for a mutual aid community would be $30 an hour. Okay, nobody's getting that. So I backed it down to $15 an hour, which is what we've asked to be minimum wage, correct? Around the country. If I stayed with these beautiful babies from 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening, as I did last week, you crunched the numbers at $15 an hour, and that was to let the beautiful mama sleep off her migraine headache that she had. What money am I leaving on the table? So rather than talk about money on the table, let's talk about blessings. Let's talk about offering each other blessings. And if I have a lovely little pot of money over there, honey, that I can just worry about getting myself to Panama with, I can continue to do the blessings, give the blessings, receive the blessings. Other things that I just recently did, as people are well aware, was escorted a couple down to Queens, New York. Lordy, Lordy, can I tell you? Can I just tell you? This was a mitzvah. That's a Jewish phrase for when you do a service with no expectation of reward. So I got to leave that alone, right? Because I escorted over a 6-hour trip in Ramadan, driven by a Iranian, I kid you not, I couldn't make this up, an Iranian woman who's been here in the United States as a US citizen and has been here for 17 years. She drove us taxi service style in a van from Vermont, 6 hours down to Queens, New York. While she was fasting, she didn't do the water fast. Okay, she knew better than that. And then drove back again that night. The family paid her, let me remember, I want to get the numbers straight and I don't want to exaggerate. $1,800. I asked and received $200 for my escort, which included some very shitty services that had to happen, unfortunately. The wheelchair bound woman had several accidents. I've done this before, but at a point very near and dear to this whole complicated story, I am still waiting to be reimbursed $44 by the husband who's sending me a money order. He's sending me a money order. He's been sending me a money order and he wants to give me more. He wants to give me $80 or $70 or $60. But since I don't have my 44, you can understand that I'm a little concerned about just getting that. And it was because I went through his ransacked apartment that he left and he's legally blind. He had left his cane and he had left a lot of mementos that I packed up nicely and in a box and mailed south to them. So I like my life. I am moving towards loving my life. I like the fact that I can share with people like you who are listening all the cool things that we can do when we care for each other and are caregivers and caretakers together. The problem I have is reimbursement and resentments that come up because we're doing it for the wrong reasons. So I want to be doing it for the right reason. And I want to be doing this from my heart. And I do expect that very, very soon I'm going to be able to float a little easier and not have to tread water so heavy. I'm doing well. I would just like to do better. I am definitely surviving, and I would like to move into thriving. So that's my story on my social work at this moment. I had a friend just try to call in, so I'm going to end this soon. I will be in the Boston area at the Wake Up the Earth events, not this coming weekend, not tomorrow and Sunday, but a week from this weekend. There's beautiful things that happen in the Jamaica Plain area. So if you're able to get over there, I'm talking thousands of people now. It started off as a small event, but it's gotten bigger. And I'm going to be dancing there, probably as a butterfly. So, any questions last minute for people? I am about to sign off. I appreciate those of you who are live with me right now. It's good seeing all of you. And yeah, the underpaid piece is different. Excellent. Sure, it was making healthy meals, of course, because I had to keep this gestational diabetic within the range that she was supposed to be with African foods, because they didn't give her any information on African foods. They just gave her information on U.S. foods. So we gave her a lot of greens during during her pregnancy. Again, good to see everybody here. This will be posted ideally over at YouTube on my The Doctor Speaks station or on my Dr. O's Medicine Show or both. And if I can't get it up there, then it's because they're trying to stop me. So once is okay, twice is suspicious, and three times we have to look seriously. Thank you, everyone. I am going away now. I hope you have a great weekend, and it was good to have you here.